Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Contrarians. We have another panel discussion for you this evening. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about bands that we feel should have been much bigger than they were. So we're actually going to go around to each person and I'm going to call upon you, and then you can let me know what band you think should have been either a mega success. I'm assuming we're going to have some obscure bands people have probably never heard before. And I'm assuming we're going to have some bands you may have heard of, but maybe some folks feel like they should have had the light shine on them a bit brighter than it did. So we'll go around. I know Joe has places to be tonight, and I'm going to throw it over to Joe, and I'm going to let him start. So Joe, tell us what band you think should have been way bigger than they were.
Okay, so I don't know how this is going to go over with the rest of the panel and the viewers, but I'm going with Cheap Trick. I know everyone knows them, and I know they have the catalog, and I know that they have platinum albums and hit singles, but I believe they should be huge, not semi-big. I don't think they should be playing suburban fairs here in Chicago. I don't think they should be third on the bill when they play here, especially when they were with Joan Jett and Hart. They played third on the bill. I think they should be up there with the Kisses and the Black Sabbaths and even the Stones. I think their catalog stands up. In fact, that album that came out a few years ago, I know they released a few albums the last few years, but I thought that Crazy Bang Zoom Hello album was fantastic. And I think their catalog has been steady. And the first few albums were great, and they hit it with Budokan. I know everyone knows Cheap Trick. They're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but they shouldn't be just an average band playing parking. I mean, I've seen them in parking lots of baseball games. I think they should be a stadium act and a headlining act, and I think they should be huge. And that's all I got. So I it's not an obscure band, but for the life of me, I can't figure out why Cheap Trick isn't much bigger than they actually are.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah.
Good pick, Joe. Thanks for joining us. I know you're in a rush today, but thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm stranded roadside. No, I'm just kidding. All right.
Yeah, I've got
Peace out, guys.
my pick is similar to yours.
Thanks for joining, Joe.
Yeah. All right.
See you, Joe.
I've got a pick similar to Joe's, so I might as well just go next. But one band that it's interesting, when we've done an episode on this band, I was kind of surprised and a little shocked to realize that I think they only had one platinum record, and it was a single. So I think their single for I Want to Be Sedated, I think, was their only platinum single. And I'm picking the Ramones. And I know that they're a big band. I know that they influenced all kinds of bands. I guess where I'm coming from, my favorite record from them is Rocket to Russia. And they had, I think a lot of their early records were incredible. Their first record, I love a lot of the records. And I just think that I'm surprised that they only had one platinum single, and I think they only had one gold record, like one gold album. I could be off by that, and I think that was like a greatest hits. I just remember when I did research for our Ramones episode, and I think the album we did was Pleasant Dreams.
I thought we found out that the debut went gold. I can't remember.
It's their greatest hits went gold.
Yeah.
And the debut, or just the greatest hits, Peter?
Just the greatest hits has gone gold. And I think that took Martin 20 years. It was a long, time.
Okay.
So they're a band, like I had their CDs. I listened to their music quite a lot. I like Rocket to Russia. I liked a lot of their songs. I like, they influenced so many people. They influenced so many bands. They were a huge, like New York band. They had a big following. They were a big punk band. They influenced like a whole genre of music. To me, a lot of their stuff, like they're classic rock and roll, and there's a lot of stuff I love about the Ramones, and there's a lot of songs I like by them. I pretty much like every song off the first three records. I know, unfortunately, the core original band has passed away. My partner actually met Marky Ramone and got his autograph, so that's cool. But I was just surprised to realize that they only had the one platinum and that was a single, and the one gold. So in my eyes, I feel like they should have been bigger. I feel like they should have had maybe more gold records at least. There's something that seems a little off about that to me. I know they were a hardworking band and they played a lot of shows, and I know they played around a lot. They played all kinds of venues too, which is surprising. They played clubs and smaller gigs and bigger gigs, and they played the US Fest in '81, I think, or '82. They played a lot of big shows, a lot of small venues, and to me, I just feel like I don't know if anybody agrees or disagrees. It is kind of maybe a controversial pick because they are such a big band, and you even see folks walking around today with like Ramones shirts and stuff like this. Like you can go to all kinds of different clothing out retail stores and they sell Ramones shirts, and so like I know they are a big band. I just feel like I was just surprised at the lack of amount of record sales success that they had. That was surprising to me. I feel like they should have been bigger than that.
Here's the
Yeah,
thing. I actually agree. The t-shirt comment is interesting because they have this illusion of being a really big band because their shirts are like a staple of like the rocker, startup kit for, you get your spiked belt and you get a Ramones shirt, it's like, but I think that, you also mentioned that they were really hardworking and they were just constantly touring, always putting albums out. I think that people took them for granted when they were around. I think if they would have broken up in 1982 and came back in 1999, they would be selling out. They would have sold out like the Garden, like the Misfits are doing now. When the Misfits were active with Danzig on vocals, they were playing shitty little clubs. And now look at them. They're playing hockey arenas and selling them out because they're another t-shirt band, but they went away for a long time and people, the mythos of the band built up so much that now it's like they're just a hot ticket.
I think a reason is that they didn't have great management. And if they had really astute management, they would have been much bigger. Because let's face it, it's one of the most iconic t-shirts ever. It's iconic. And you go up to the average punter with a Ramones t-shirt and just say, name me 3 Ramones songs, they would struggle. They know the emblem, but they don't actually know the music. So I think it's got to do with the management, that they weren't a bigger band because they had all the elements there.
I think that a lot of the bands that were playing big arenas while they were together, selling a lot of albums, decades from now will be forgotten and the Ramones will be remembered. So I think I'd rather be that kind of band than be the hot ticket at the time. They're going to be, and this is coming from a guy who does not like the band, So I hear the music, I go, oh, I understand why they weren't big, but that's a different story.
So when did the first Ramones album come out? Was it 75, 76?
76.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, think of the musical landscape at the time. And I'm sorry, everyone, I don't have much of a voice tonight, so I'll talk as best I can. But there wasn't a lot that was in that kind of peppy, very short song, very simple music kind of genre. It was not wide appeal music. And very much after that, coming into that from the 21st century, I understand what you're saying, but as a 70s music fan, I just don't think that they ever had what it took to really break wide.
But how influential were they to the Green Days and that genre of power punk? I mean, it's a direct lineage between the Ramones and that 90s, Green Day, sort of power punk.
Yeah, but you can influence without being an individual success.
I don't want to take too much more time, but maybe another appropriate pick that I just thought of would have been maybe the New York Dolls could have been somebody, because I hear that when documentaries, books, I hear all kinds of people quote or talk about the New York Dolls, and they didn't go very far at all. I think they put out 1 record, maybe 2. Yeah. I'm going to throw it over to Todd. Why don't you tell us what band you think should have been a lot bigger, and let us know what your favorite record by that band is.
Okay, so my choice is Utopia, or Todd Rundgren's Utopia, if you prefer. This was a band that had a lot of potential and had a producer engineer as one of their members and had a videographer as one of their members. So I'm not really sure I have some ideas about what happened, but I'm going to go through the discography really quick and just so that you can hear the chart positions of their albums. So they start with Todd Rundgren's Utopia, which is a full-on prog album. It's got a 30-minute long song. They look like this, and a bunch of 6 guys, a bunch of people that Todd had played with before. And their next album is called Ra, spelled R-A, and I don't have a physical copy of it to show you, but in that album, they slimmed down to a quartet, and it's kind of half prog and half pop rock. And then they do Oops, No Wrong Planet from 1977. This charts at number 73, number 66 in Canada. It has one of the singles was a song called Love is the Answer, which did not chart, and then it charted for England Jam and John Ford Coley 2 years later. And everybody knows that song. Most people don't know it's a Utopia song. And they moved on to this album, Adventures in Utopia, which was 1979. This was their most successful album. It got to number 32 in the States, 84 in Canada. Has a number 27 single, a song called Set Me Free. There they are in their looking kind of new way. And they had a video album for that album where they made a videotape, a commercially released videotape that was every song on the album. They made a video for every song. And that was pretty early for that, 79, 80. Their next album was supposed to be this one, Swing to the Right. It was already done and ready to come out. And then they decided to do this Beatles parody album to Face the Music instead. They submitted a song to the movie Roadie to be on the soundtrack, the movie that's got Meatloaf in it. And it was rejected by the producers of the movie because they thought they'd get sued by the Beatles, because the song was called I Just Want to Touch You, and it was almost exactly like I Want to Hold Your Hand, and they did that on purpose. And there's a great quote from Todd Rundgren where he says, so we were, actually, I think it was Willie Wilcox, the drummer, that said this. He said, we heard that and we thought, that sounds like a great idea. Let's get sued. That'd be fun. And so they made this album, which is almost, it's not Beatle covers, but they're kind of like every song is based on one or two different Beatles songs. And it's a really interesting album. But they decided to do that, and I think it kind of spoiled their momentum. That album got to number 102 on the US charts, didn't chart in Canada. And then when Swing to the Right finally came out, oh, I'm sorry, To Face the Music was number 65. Swing to the Right came out, got to number 102, didn't chart in Canada, didn't have any hit singles. And they kind of regrouped and sort of morphed again into pretty much a pure power pop band for this album. 1982, they signed to a new label, Network Records, and I think Network folded before the album was even through with its promotional stage. And so, so again, they were kind of they put out a really good product, but there wasn't any promotional backing for it. Todd Rundgren he's been called a pioneer in music video, and one of the things that might have gone wrong with them is that he started out making music videos and he was pretty good at it, and he knew a lot of stuff about computer graphics and stuff like that when all that stuff was in its earlier stages, but he never really became a really good video producer. And this album right here got to number 84 on the US charts, didn't chart in Canada. It had a single called Don't Fail Me Now, which got to number 82. And it's got a video that got played on MTV, but it's a terrible video. It's this computer generated thing where their heads are on the bodies of bugs and they're dancing around, and all the bugs have lots of feet. And so that may have been a reason why that wasn't very popular. They went on to this album. They lost, they were not signed to a major label, so they started their own label, Utopia Records, distributed by Passport. And this is a really good album. This album and the one after it kind of morphs a little bit more towards prog, but it's kind of a power pop prog combo. And strong album, got to number 100, got to number 74, and then really their final album was this one, POV, and it came out in 1985, and its chart position was 161, and it had I should say that Oblivion had a video, a pretty good video. It was on MTV, but the song was Crybaby, and the song Crybaby didn't chart. But the video didn't get played. But this is a really strong album. Mine's signed by Chasm Sultan, and it was they were fragmenting by this point. They weren't getting along. All the drums are programmed, but it's a surprisingly strong album despite that. I should, and then just to finish up the discography, they did this little best of called Trivia that's got 2 new songs on it. This was 1986 and nothing charted. This didn't chart. Singles didn't chart. I don't even think there were any videos for the 2 new songs that were on this album. But I should mention that the guys in the band, Todd Rundgren, Cass Salton, Roger Powell, and Willie Wilcox, they stayed pretty consistent during that whole era. In '93, they got together and did a concert tour, a short concert tour in Japan, and released this. And then they did a tour in 2018, and which was really fantastic. I went to it, and it was kind of a bucket list thing for me because I'd never seen them back in the day. But I'm not really sure what went wrong there. They could all sing. They were all great instrumentalists. My favorite album is this one. It's got a feature. It's got a song that features each member as the lead vocalist. It's got a pretty long, kind of proggy, almost fusiony song called Caravan. That's got a drum solo and a Rundgren guitar solo that trades off between the guitars and the keyboards. And it just seemed like everything was there. I remember when I was in the 10th grade and I heard this album, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be huge. Everyone's going to love this. And it made some waves, but didn't really do all that well. So as you can tell from the chart positions, this album got to number 32, and that was the highest they ever got. They only charted with 3 singles total. All of their singles failed to chart. So I'm not sure what went wrong there, but I've always thought that Utopia, in their time especially, early 80s through late 80s, probably should have been a lot bigger than they were.
Cool.
Very
Nice.
cool. I'm going to be going around and downloading these albums on Spotify as people are talking about them.
Yeah.
Why don't I throw it over to Reed next? Take it away,
Okay.
Reed.
Thanks, Marco. Can you guys hear me? Do I need to bump up
Yeah.
my mic
Sound
volume?
great. No,
Okay.
perfect.
All right. I wanted to go to a band from my youth. It pisses me off that 1990 was 32 years ago. So it's to me, one album band, and that is the River Dogs. If anybody knows these guys at all, they know them because Vivian Campbell played guitar for them after he left Whitesnake. Although their singer, a man named Lamoth, not really sure how to pronounce his name, was a fabulous singer, and he also had a pretty active solo career. And I want to address kind of an elephant in the room here, and that is the idea of the death of hair metal. And I really think that as we approach the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, there has to be some kind of space where hard rock bands are not lumped in with hair metal. River Dogs was such a non-hair metal act. They may be equated with Badlands or Blue Murder, whose albums came out in 1989. And again, hotshot guitarists, great vocalists. But River Dogs was much more of like a, pardon me, like a John Mellencamp, Americana. All of their songs have acoustic rhythm parts. And then they have Vivian Campbell's flash leads over the top of it. I wouldn't describe it as soul music by any stretch of the imagination, but the singer is very soulful. It's a very American sounding band. By this point, Vivian had been living in Los Angeles for nearly 20 years, and the influence on his style is pretty obvious. In his early years in Dio, he's very Gary Moore, and by now he's got a lot more Eddie Van Halen influence in his playing, something he has never really said, but that's what I hear. The album is full of great songs. It is very melodic. It's the best solos Vivian ever played. They're amazing. Not just flash, but great melody and good hooks to them. I said the vocals are really, really good, and the lyrics are good. But I think the problem, again, if we get back to that idea at the end of the 80s, start of the 90s, is that everybody that was playing guitars got lumped into this sort of hair metal pot. And, bands to me like Damn Yankees and Bad English, those are not hair metal bands, right? They're rock bands. There has to be some kind of space for that sort of music. But record companies did not have a promotional mechanism for that. What they knew how to promote at that time was Cinderella and Warrant and Poison. So here you have a band that's coming in producing like hard rock Americana. They've got no space. There's no distribution mechanism for that. And ironically, what they remind me more of than anything is a better Pearl Jam, which was on the same label 2 years later. So River Dogs are like Pearl Jam with a much better singer. Jamie, I know you like what's his name in Pearl Jam?
Eddie
I
Vedder.
can't. Yeah, Eddie Vedder. I cannot stand that man's vocals. But River Dogs, Lamoth is a great singer, and it's a rare instance of, I think they came out too soon. Also, their production is very slick. It's very LA, and by 1990, people were moving away from that and into the more lo-fi sounds of grunge. And if this album had come out in 1991 or 1992 and been produced in Seattle, I think it had been a smash. It'd have been bigger than 10.
Nice.
Very cool.
Well argued.
Yeah. Thanks for the input, and I'm going to throw it over to Brett.
Awesome.
Take it away, Brett.
So my choice is a band that didn't get big due to a series of unfortunate events, and I'll get to that at the end. But my choice is Hanoi Rocks. Great mixture of hard rock, punk rock. You have some blues mixed in there, and then all wrapped up in that post, that late 1970s glam aesthetic. Both my parents are actually really big Hanoi Rocks fans, so that's how I became familiar with them at a fairly young age. But when I started listening to them, I was probably 14 or 15. I was also really into The Clash at the time. And I kind of picked up on some similarities, especially in some of the later material that The Clash was putting out. And little did I know that there was actually some connection there. Terry Chimes, the drummer of The Clash, would actually wind up going to play drums for a couple shows for Hanoi Rocks in the end. Now, I know Two Steps from the Move, I believe it's called, tends to be considered the go-to record, but for me, this is probably, for me, this is my favorite, also because this was the first one I listened to, so there's definitely some sentimental attachment to it. Some really good tracks on here. The opening track, Motivatin', Teenage Outsiders, Lightning Blue Bars, which was, I believe, somewhat of a single overseas. I don't think it made much of a splash here, though I think it did eventually wind up getting some video airplay a couple of years down the road. The album isn't perfect by any means. There are some songs on here that I'm not too crazy about. And if there was one, I guess, bad thing I had to say about this album, it's that the production is just really bad. It's really flat. It just takes away, it takes away any life. Like, it doesn't really it doesn't have like a bass to it. It doesn't have like that jumpy feeling that you listen to if you're listening to, like hard rock or punk rock. And from what I understand, a lot of that has to do with the producer, who I can't remember his name off the top of my head, the engineer for Hysteria on Def Leppard. So
Nigel Green?
Huh?
Nigel Green?
No, man, I'll have to look
Mike
his name.
Shipley?
Huh?
Mike Shipley?
No, Peter Woolscroft.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, apparently he was an engineer. I don't know in what capacity. Now, unfortunately, even if you're not familiar with their music of Hanoi Rocks, you're familiar probably with the fact that Vince Neil was responsible for the death of their drummer Razzle. And unfortunately, not only like that incident just totally it killed the band. It took out all momentum that they had at the time. And I think it was maybe like a year or so later when they would finally call it quits, and it couldn't have happened at a more worse time. Bob Ezrin was really big on them. He had just produced the last record, Two Steps from the Mat, right? Yeah, Steps from the Move. they were just starting to hit it big in the United States. They had like three, Up Around the Bend was a big hit. Don't You Ever Leave Me, Million Miles Away. And like I said, they were just starting to make the move and some noise in the United States. And if that hadn't happened, I really think they would have been a big band going further into the 1980s, especially within the glam scene, because, and when I was looking up stuff, just, reading up on stuff, I had found a quote from the guitarist of the Foo Fighters saying that he felt that it was almost overnight in Los Angeles, where it's just like they show up and then it was almost instantly everybody's dressing like Mike Monroe, everybody's dressing like all the other members. And, I guess I'll end it with this. And if for a band that was gone before the height of that 1980s glam scene, there are a lot of bands that owe them a lot of credit that just don't get it at all. The only band off the top of my head that has been very vocal about them is Guns N' Roses. Like, you look at pictures of Mike Monroe and then you look at pictures of Axl Rose, and it looks like a splitting image, like especially when in the earlier days of Guns N' Roses where he had the teased hair and everything like that. And I think Axl Rose would go on to sing on Mike Monroe's first solo album after. But yeah, they're my pick. And, they called it quits in 85, and then luckily they came back. I believe it was in 2002. And I don't know if they're active anymore, but from 2002 to maybe like 2015, 16, they had released maybe 3 or 4 albums.
We lose him?
Yeah,
Hello?
I think we're losing Brett. We lost that last little bit there.
2000, you said 2003? Brett? No, he's gone again.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Hopefully he comes back.
All right. Why don't it's caught me off guard. Okay. I'm going to throw it over to,
Hear me?
yeah, now we can. We lost you right at the end.
No, you're still.
Oh,
frozen.
he's gone.
There we go.
Okay. I'll throw it over to Andee. Andee Blacksugar from Blacksugar Transmission. Take it away, Andee.
All right. Thank you. Well, first of all, it goes without saying King's X. It goes without saying Jellyfish. But those bands already have like a kind of a deafening choir of supporters, right?
Yeah.
So I want to talk about an artist that for some reason doesn't really have that either. This band is sort of a one-man band that goes by the name of Self. Self is sort of an autonomous project by a guy named Matt Mahaffey. He's a extremely precocious, very gifted multi-instrumentalist, singer, producer, songwriter. And he, as you can see, I got this on sale. This came out in 1995. This is his debut album. It's called Subliminal Plastic Motives. Do you have it? Do you have it?
I'm downloaded. I have it here. I'm downloaded it on Spotify right now.
Oh, I see. Okay,
I'm going along. I'm downloading Utopia. I'm going along these bands.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I would say, I would describe this music as, first of all, this came out on Zoo Entertainment. And apparently it did get some traction a little bit on MTV, and they got some opening slots. He put a band together and they had some opening, some nice touring opportunities with Garbage and people like that. Musically, I would call it very high contrast, very high information music, meaning he's obviously got this omnivorous diet musically. And so you hear elements of kind of like the fuzz guitars of Nirvana or the Pixies mixed with this this kind of kitchen sink production of like the Dust Brothers, and like a power pop aspect of a Jellyfish with like beautiful harmonies. The musicianship is off the charts. And on top of all that, the songs are just like straight up catchy. Like there's no reason why these shouldn't be big hits. The lyrics are kind of goofy. They're kind of typical of the time, similar to Beck, kind of like opaque and nonsensical and kind of, surreal. I haven't tried finding any meaning in the lyrics per se. It's just kind of fun mid-90s music, but there's just a level of craftsmanship that is just, head and shoulders above a lot of what else was kind of much bigger at the time. Actually, when I was re-listening to this today, it reminded me of another 1995 album, which is the first album by Poe. This is an album called Hello. This is another record, another artist that should be way more well known, but it kind of sounds like one of the early Pro Tools productions, where they were finally able to do really amazing things with loops and sampling, and just like these really amazing sonic scene changes within the song, this copy cut paste kind of kaleidoscopic effect. So a little bit of success here. The second album I like even more than the first one. This is called Breakfast with Girls. This came out, I think, in 1999. This sounds less moored to its era. I think it sounds a little bit more timeless to me. It's even more clever with its use of samples. I think the songwriting is even more developed. And then, not to be outdone by his own precociousness, he puts out a third album the next year, Gizmodri, which is made entirely with toy instruments. This is very much a Pro Tools album. I would suspect that a certain amount of digital audio trickery would be involved to record entirely with toy instruments and make it sound as rich and lush as this album sounds. This has a cover of What a Fool Believes that is absolutely flawless. There are sort of ancillary musicians that he brings in here and there on these records. It's mostly him playing everything. One of his co-conspirators was his brother. I think his name was Mike Mahaffey. So Matt Mahaffey is the main guy. I think his brother's name was Mike, and he unfortunately died in the 2000s, I think around 2004 or so. So Self kind of went away for a while, and some weird kind of online only releases came out and some scattered EPs and stuff. And then he finally reemerged in a significant way in 2014 with an EP called Super Fake Nice, which is a really great kind of return to form for him. But the thing that I don't understand is why an artist like Beck got so much traction in the 90s, and then you had this guy who was arguably making a more palatable type of version of the same type of thing, and it just kind of was greeted with widespread indifference, really. So yeah, that's my pick. Self, I would say I would start with Gizmodri, the all toy album. I think it's like probably the best representation of what he does, and then maybe move backwards from there. And that's it. That's my pick.
Cool. Good stuff. Good
Awesome.
stuff.
Thanks, Andy. Just quickly, Brett, you kind of dropped off right at the end. You're dropping off right when you're talking about their later albums. Is there anything else you wanted to mention? I think we're kind of wrapping up a bit.
Just that the last three albums that they had put out, they released their first album after 22 years in 2002, and that album and the two after that are just as good and hold up with anything else that they had put out from 81 to 84, 85.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks.
I'm going to throw it over to Martin, martinpopoff.com. Let's see what you have to say, Martin.
All right. I agree with Andy that there were certain bands I didn't want to talk about because a lot of people have, and even I have before. I know I've talked about on Pete's show, I've talked about Stars from the 70s. I think I've talked about Rex. I've certainly talked about King's X, and people know that I think Love Hate were masterful at what they did. Love Blackout in the Red Room, and then Wasted in America is one of my favorite albums of all time. I thought about Porcupine Tree as well, but here's a band I don't think I have talked about. So certainly not this band, Tigers of Pantang. and somewhat not this band, Tigers of Pantang. And you know, I'll stay sober about this one. Maybe not them either, but this Tigers of Pantang, by the time they get to the cage, I thought they should have been much bigger. This was produced by Peter Collins. It's probably one of the best sounding albums he ever did, because he frankly doesn't make very good sounding albums. Fred Purser has replaced John Sykes, but all along the way, they were good enough looking guys in the band. They had a guitar hero. Those albums were pretty accomplished. They were on MCA. But this one, he's replaced by Fred Purser. They've still got John Deverell, who's the secret weapon, an amazing, great singer, good looking guy. Like, they basically seem like a very presentable band that could have been big. This album is very short. It bothered us at the time. It's very poppy, which also bothered us at the time. But I think the songs have superstar kind of all over them. They've got external songwriter helping them a little bit. I think his name is, Steve Thompson. He was working for Neat Records at the time. But this had a pretty big hit with the cover of Love Potion #9, but some really good mellow songs on here, like Paris by Air, or poppy commercial songs. Rendezvous, Danger in Paradise, Making Tracks is really cool. Tides is cool. The Actor. So it's a little bit smart, but it's also beautifully recorded, greatly performed. It fits in that sort of Def Leppard high and dry space. And had they been a band that perhaps they broke up right after this is part of the problem, but had they been a band that, uprooted and moved to LA right at this time, this is an 82 album. I think it could have been a much bigger album, and they could have been, if you're in the face of your record label all the time, and you're on your boots on the ground touring America, and you're living in LA, I think some of these new wave of British heavy metal bands could have gone places. This is certainly the biggest one. And I just think there's just an undeniable appeal and commerciality and accessibility about what they were doing right at this time. It was the right record at the right time. Again, high and dry into Pyromania. Coulda, should have been huge. Tigers of Pantang. There you go.
Very cool. Thanks, Martin. I'm going to throw it over to Peter Kerr. Let us know what band should have been bigger than they were.
Thanks. Coming from Australia, there's hundreds of bands that Hometown Heroes got to #1, sold, multiple platinum copies of albums, and just got nowhere, just did not transquite across the equator. Bit of a head scratch when you think of bands like Men at Work and Air Supply. They translated, but some of your Hometown Heroes didn't. I'm just going to whiz through some, quickly, some honorable mentions. Rose Tattoo, Scar for Life, 10 years prior to Guns N' Roses, dirtiest slide guitar that you'll ever hear. It's like a real heavy sort of grungy version of the Rolling Stones. Rose Tattoo, they should have made it 10 years ahead of Guns N' Roses. Cold Chisel, East, Jimmy Barnes, influenced by Free, Deep Purple. Jimmy Barnes was asked to, basically do the vocals for Van Halen and Deep Purple. This band, legends in Australia, didn't translate across the equator. Great lyricists in Don Walker, brilliant. The Vinyls, Chrissy Amphlett, this band should have been Pat Benatar big. I know they had that one hit in the 90s, but this band, they were on the cusp of the new wave, and it, should have been much bigger than they were. The band I'm going to pick is going to be the Angels, Face to Face, also known in America as Angel City or the Angels from Angel City. No wonder they didn't make it with that name. So this album, the Angels were probably one of the best live bands that I ever saw, in my youth. It's a rite of passage in Australia that you see an Angels concert. I would describe their sound as AC/DC on amphetamines. The style of guitar was very sort of jagged staccato. The songwriters John Brewster and Rick Brewster described that, yes, they were influenced by AC/DC, but when we were actually constructing the sound, we wanted to throw a little bit of punk sensibility. So they went with the Clash and they went with the Sex Pistols. but fore and foremost, they had one of the greatest lead frontmen of all time, Doc Nielsen. I've seen many frontmen in my time, but I'd have to say on his day, he was world class. He was one of the great frontmen of all time. I would describe him as a maniac on stage, part Iggy Pop, a little bit of Lou Reed, bit of David Bowie. It was a mixture. Do yourself a favor, see him on YouTube, but Face to Face is the album that I choose as probably their signature album. It's got virtually their greatest hits: Take a Long Line, Marseille, I Ain't the One, After the Rain. I know, Martin, you say that the Angels, you describe them as AC/DC with 30% better lyrics. I'll go further and say 50% better lyrics, because I tell you, the Brian Johnson, don't compare it to that era.
Yeah.
But, the topics that they covered, for a hard rock band, lyrics with intelligence, like dystopian government, corruption, drug addiction. They just covered the gamut beyond the normal hard rock sort of, lyrics. They
For the record,
influenced-
I'm surprised I ever said 30%, because I would have gone 70% or 80. I would even go
Yeah.
over top. So that's what I really think. Yeah, I love them to death as well. So
yeah, they were so originally they were part of the Alberts record label. So they were signed, introduced by Malcolm and Angus Young to the Alberts label. They did a couple of albums on the Alberts label, which was Face to Face. They should have stayed with the management. They signed to Epic, and they did tours in America. I think they were support to Triumph, which was a disaster. And they also supported the Kinks, and they were so good live that the Kinks kicked them off. So they did a support gig to the Kinks in Madison Square Garden. They got asked to do an encore, and the Kinks turned off the lights and they got booted off the tour. So they were so good live. A live experience at an Angels concert was communal. It was between the lead singer and the audience. And you could actually, when you're in the audience, you could feel the floorboards lifting up and down, people just jumping up and down. And as I said, if you want to sort of describe the sound, it was very much like AC/DC meets the Clash, meets the Sex Pistols, but with more intelligent lyrics. They influenced a lot of bands. Pearl Jam have cited them. So have Guns N' Roses. Check out on YouTube. I think when Doc Nielsen sadly passed away, maybe 10 years ago, Axl Rose or Guns N' Roses covered Marseille. Nirvana cited them as an influence, and even Great White have covered some of their songs. So they did have a little bit of influence, very much cult, but they just didn't break through.
Sure.
And if you just listen to their music, it's just a big heat strap. And I think maybe it was just some bad decisions on a management side, getting the wrong tour. But if they just got the right tour and the right management, I think they would have broken through around the 89 era with Guns N' Roses. Albums to also check out are probably Live Line, which is it's basically their live album, greatest hits. No Exit's a good one. Some of their later albums is not as good because they became a little bit more commercial, but that's my pick. I think Face to Face, if there's any justice, I think it would be good that people just check this band out. The Angels, not to be confused with Angel, that's why they changed their name to Angel City. Please check them out.
yeah, very cool.
Awesome.
Nicely argued. Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. I'm going to throw it over to Jamie next. Jamie, sometimes on Sea of Tranquility. I think I know what your pick is. Is it Frank Stallone?
Frank Stallone? No. Frank Stallone. Why would you say that? No, it was going to be the Front up until 10 minutes before this show started. I know Martin's not a big fan, but I always loved them. They did one album and then they did a second as Baker's Pink. But then I was testing my camera 10 minutes before showtime and I saw my shirt. I'm like, how did I put this on without thinking this is the band I should talk about? I'm from Pittsburgh. The Clarks are from Pittsburgh. If you're from Pittsburgh, you gotta say the Clarks. So with 10 minutes left, I got all my Clark stuff together. And they are a mixture of, let's say, the Beatles and Springsteen with a little bit of a punk attitude. And in Pittsburgh, man, to this day, their first album came out in 1989, and it sounds like a band's first album called I'll Tell You What, Man. It's a little bit raw, a little bit punkish, but you know, the songwriting is there. They're like a diamond in the rough, but there are some good songs on there. And I saw them for the first time in early 90. So these guys are kind of my age. I've been seeing them live since 1990. So I'm kind of growing up with them in a way. And they got a lot of albums, guys. Their second album, self-titled, which has Penny on the Floor, which to this day, if you ever drive through Pittsburgh and put on WDVE, this band gets played mixed in with the Skinnards and the Who's. You would think that you missed out on something. What is this Clark's band and why is it getting played so much? And Penny on the Floor is like a Pittsburgh folk song. It's as well written a song. These guys are as well, they write songs as well as anybody ever. These guys are great. They're not going to blow you away with blazing guitar solos or anything, but their songs are great. And then they released Love Gone Sour, Suspicion, and Bad Debt, which, you know, as these are getting released, nobody's surprised that they're not big. These are just local, you know, self-released kind of albums, but they're getting played on the radio in Pittsburgh. They're playing around the Pittsburgh area. And then came Someday Maybe. And one of the songs on here, I'm going to say Courtney, I think was featured in a movie with Winona Ryder called Boys. So now as Pittsburghers, you know, Pittsburghers are proud people and they always root for, if you're from, if anyone's watching me right now from Pittsburgh, they probably got their terrible towel out going, go Laszlo, go. That's how they are. So we were rooting. Okay, it's brimming, right? It's starting. Well, then they did Let It Go, which is, I think, their best album. And we were all like, here's the hits. Hooks galore. And at the time, you got bands like the Gin Blossoms, and you know, all throughout the 90s, and Toad the Wet Sprocket. These guys would mix in with that, but they got a more of an attitude, more of an edge to keep things interesting. And this has Snowman and The Letter, hooks galore. Every song sounds like it should have been a hit. And I kind of understand why a lot of bands don't make it big. Because Tim, you worked in radio, right? What was the average time someone listened to the radio like in the 80s and 90s? Like 10, 13 minutes was the average or something?
Well, the problem is getting a new song added, right?
Right, because
it's got a lot to do with it.
Radio played the same songs over and over and over because the average listener was what, like 15 minutes at the most. So they wanted to make sure the listener heard those songs within that 15 minutes. So you only got so much room on the radio, so many hours in the day. And if everybody's favorite band who thought should be bigger got played on the radio, every band would get played once every 7 days because there would be just too much music on the radio. So I understand how hard it is to get in there. But at the same time, my goodness, we were all rooting for the Clarks. And then came this album. And I was living in Columbus, Ohio, where I am now at the time. Another Happy Ending. And I heard a single Maybe here on the radio in Columbus. Like, yes, this is it. I'm out of Pittsburgh and I'm hearing them on the radio. I heard them that one time. That was it. That might have been the only time. Boy, I got lucky. So then they released Fast Moving Cars. And, you know, these guys aren't too old yet. I mean, this is 2004. But here it comes. They're going on David Letterman. The Clarks on David Letterman. So we are all sitting there. Every Pittsburgher. We're doing this. It's 11:35. We're waiting. And we hear, you know, the opening. David Letterman tonight, the Clarks. Yes, everyone's so excited. And what do they do live? Everybody wanted Shimmy Low, Shimmy, Shimmy Low. They do the worst song on the album, Hell on Wheels. Worst song on the album. And everybody knew it. It was like watching the Steelers lose to the Packers in Super Bowl 45. We all just went, no. It was so bad that the Clarks had to make statements why they performed that song. The producers wanted them to, they were going to do Shimmy Low, but they were told to do Hell on Wheels. I swear to God, I think at that moment, their shot came and went right there. You
Wild.
could go out and watch it on YouTube. I'm sure put in Clark's David Letterman,
Yeah.
and it's the first song on the album and the worst song. They could have picked any of the other 12 songs. Then came Restless Days, and yeah, it's a good album, but none of us were excited about them getting popular anymore. Now they're getting close to their 40s, and we know artists, once they hit 40, you're not going to get big or anything. And then their latest album came out a few years ago, and it's a far cry from the first album. This is very strummy, very Americana. It's not my favorite. It's a band getting older. But yeah, the Clarks, man, they got so close with that Letterman gig, and it just went. But I have seen this band.
Yeah.
You know, they play Florida. They'll play here in Columbus. You know, they a little bit up and down the East Coast. I've probably seen them 50 times, something like that. I mean, it is a blast. They do a song called Cigarette. Everybody throws cigarettes up on the stage. And when they play Pittsburgh today, they can play to about 5,000 people.
Wow.
Pittsburgh's an island, man. It's 3 rivers. Sometimes I wonder if it's 4 rivers, all surrounding Pittsburgh like an island, because they are their own people, you know.
Wow, that's cool. That's quite a
So go
story.
check
I'm
them
gonna
out.
check them out on
Marco,
YouTube.
I want you to download the Clarks and everybody else.
I'm downloading the
And
first,
I want
the
a
first
full
album.
report on my desk in the morning on what you think. No sleep for you tonight, Marco.
I'm downloading the first album right now.
Okay.
I'm
Don't do the first one, Marco. Don't drop the ball like they did on Letterman. Do Let It Go.
All right, I'll do both. I'll listen to both. All right, cool. Thanks, Jamie. Now, last but not least, I'm going to throw it over to Tim. Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Take it away, Tim.
Thanks, Marco. So for this one, I know that a lot of you probably thought, oh, he's going to talk about Y&T, but I think I went into them in pretty good depth the last time we did something like this. I almost picked Coney Hatch, but I thought Martin might. So I thought, no. And by the way,
choice. Yeah.
And by the way, Coney Hatch also covered the Angels song Marseille on their comeback album 4, which was about almost 9 years ago now. So yeah, they were obviously influenced by them too. Okay, so I'm going totally mainstream on this one, and it's the Hometown Heroes thing, and this happens a lot. A band that was fairly big in Canada for 4 or 5 years had little tiny bits of success south of the border, but it is so hard to break through. And a band that I think had all the ingredients to be a really big band and the kind of band people got sick of. And the band is Honeymoon Suite. Some of you might have heard of them. They're called Honeymoon Suite because they're from Niagara Falls, Ontario. And they came out in 1984, self-titled debut album. The first single and probably their calling card songs is a song called New Girl Now, which I actually have here this is a promo single. So it's got the song on one side. And on the other side is one of those open-ended interviews. Martin and I have talked about this. There would be a question sheet that would have originally come with this to make it sound like you're the one interviewing the band. Just thought I'd show that off. Pretty distinctive album cover. A lot of people in Canada grew up with this, The Bed of Nails. I literally was into this band from the get-go because I liked everything they came out with. There were 4 singles off of this album. They were signed to Warner Brothers internationally, and in Canada, it's this WEA, which is Warner Electra Atlantic. So it's the Canadian. Now it's Warner Music Canada, and that makes a difference because it's if you sign to a major label, but you're only signing from the Canadian end of it. Sometimes that means that your albums, first of all, might not even be released in the States, or they're going to have very limited distribution. But these guys were on Warner Brothers Records in the States, and they had a pretty good shot. So 4 singles off of this first album: New Girl Now, Burning in Love, Wave Babies, and Stay in the Light. Those were all video staples on Much Music, Canada's MTV. They played the crap out of them all through 84, 85. If I had to describe what they sounded like, I've heard people say they were sort of like Canada's Bon Jovi, but I don't think so. I think they kind of looked more like Bon Jovi, but they were more like Canada's Night Ranger. They occupied that space, I think, between just plain rock, like bands like Journey and REO Speedwagon and Foreigner, and then harder rock bands like Van Halen and Whitesnake. They're somewhere in between. That's why I say Night Ranger. Very commercial, obviously. Their guitar player, one of the main songwriters, Derry Green, great guitar player, kind of a shredder, very, very Eddie Van Halen influenced. And on this album, they opened for Bryan Adams, who was at his peak of success then. They opened for Billy Idol. They opened for April Wine. They opened for Jethro Tull, actually. And they opened for Aerosmith when Aerosmith was on their Back in the Saddle tour. So they got some big, big opening slots. New Girl Now made a dent on the American rock charts. I think it was like a top 10 single on the American rock chart. Only got the number 57 on the pop chart. So it says 1985. I don't think it actually came out until 1986. I think it's one of those cases where the jacket is finished, but it's in the warehouse for a couple of months. Second album, The Big Prize. And for you trivia collectors, this is a Hugh Syme, or partially Hugh Syme designed album cover. And this groom on the cover is the same guy that's on the cover of Rush's Power Windows, which probably would have been done around the same time. I'm not 100% sure about that, but that is supposedly the same guy. And he supposedly owns a record store. I can never remember his name. Band on the back, of course, a lot of the girls like them. They kind of had all the ingredients, like I said, to make it. Their highest charting song in the States, and the only song of theirs to break the top 40 was this song, Feel It Again, one of my all-time favorite songs. There was a power ballad on here called What Does It Take? That should have been bigger, got to like 52. The other significant thing about this album is that it was produced by Bruce Fairbairn and engineered by Bob Rock. So it's got that Vancouver, the big, big, heavy drum sound, which when I was 10, 11 years old, I thought that's the way drums should be recorded. It was just perfect for radio-friendly rock music. And I have heard stories that it was partially because of this album that led Bon Jovi to use Bruce Fairbairn and go to Vancouver and produce what would become Slippery and Wet. Now, I've also heard that it was Black and Blue's second album, Without Love, also produced by Fairbairn and Rock, that influenced him. And I've heard Mike Reno from Loverboy say that John actually asked him for Bruce Fairbairn's number. The truth is probably somewhere a combination of the three. So on that album, they opened for Journey, they opened for Ted Nugent, they opened for 38 Special. These were big tours that they were on. And for some reason, they were just not cracking that upper level to break through in the States, which is a very, very hard thing for Canadian bands to do. I think part of the problem is they didn't have, they were managed by, what were they managed by? Well, I can't remember who they were managed by. I think that has a lot to do with it. They didn't have the management based in LA or based in New York or based in somewhere in the record company's face all the time, keeping them on rotation in MTV. I think if they'd had like a Q Prime or Doc McGee or even Bruce Allen, who managed Bryan Adams, I think if they'd had that high-powered management, they might have sustained. Another thing that slowed their momentum was that they were working on their third album, which was supposed to come out sometime in 1987. Their lead singer, a guy named Johnny D, was in a motorcycle accident. That probably pushed it back about a year, and I think they lost a lot of momentum. The third album, Warner Brothers took such an interest in this band, they actually had Ted Templeman produce the third album. But the first thing he produced for them was the title song from the first Lethal Weapon movie, which was actually a song written by Michael Kamen. And if you're thinking, okay, it must be some sort of Danger Zone type of song. No, not at all. It's kind of a weird, kind of dark ballad, which didn't really do them any favors. But finally, in early 88, this album comes out, the third album, Racing After Midnight. And I think what happened here, this is when the decline starts, because they didn't really get any big tours. I think they ended up in the UK opening for Status Quo. And that was the last thing that they released on Warner Brothers internationally. From this point forward, the next couple of things they put out were strictly Warner Music Canada, which has distribution strictly inside of Canada. Now in Canada, they had enough radio singles to put this compilation out, the singles, in 1989. And the last thing that they did for a major label came out in 1991. This album called Monsters Under the Bed. This is a German record, because I don't even think they made vinyl copies of this in Canada by 1991. And one thing I do want to show you that's really funny about this one, I've never seen another one like it, is I bought this record off Discog. So here you go. Here's side 1. Here's side 2. So you play like maybe the first song. They put out a few other like sort of more experimental albums, independent labels that kind of got back on track with this one. They put out in 2008 called Clifton Hill, which is named after part of Niagara Falls. This one's all signed. And 2016, they put this EP out called Hands Up. They put out a few new singles. They're working on a new album. And like I said, I think that these guys should have been able to do these package tours now where they're touring with the likes of Journey and Foreigner and Loverboy and Night Ranger and just had, you know, hit after hit that people knew. I don't know why they didn't quite break through into the States. I know there are a lot of great Canadian acts that just had a certain Canadianness to them, maybe a little bit of quirkiness. Kim Mitchell comes to mind, certainly Max Webster, but Kim Mitchell was more commercial. But even then, there was just something about his music that was a little bit different. These guys were as straightforward as a rock band could be coming out of the 80s. So I really don't understand why they weren't bigger in the States. The only thing I can figure was management and maybe just bad luck.
Yeah. Wow. Great. Cool
Awesome.
story.
Cool. Thanks, Tim.
Excellent.
And thanks everybody for showing up tonight. This was a fun discussion.
Yeah.
We're gonna have more polls, more panel discussions. So hopefully we'll see all you folks around. We thank you all for all your support that you've provided to us. And if anybody wants to join us in these discussions, just run over to Patreon. Any tier will get you on the panel discussions. We have a bunch coming up in the next couple of weeks. We also have t-shirts. We have our channel if you want to like and subscribe our channel. And some of our folks come from their own channels. So if you can like and subscribe their channels, that would be cool too. We all love music. We all love talking about music. So we appreciate everybody for coming out tonight. So a lot of cool bands, a lot of good music I'm going to be listening to over the next little while. So
Absolutely.
thanks everybody.
Thanks again, guys. Talk to you later.
Rock on.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah.